Stare, don't keep following the camera through the shots because, it might mess up the director's shot. Our show plays like a house concert to our audience. It's really comfortable, familiar, friendly, and that's what's really special about the show.
Okay.
What they really like about it. So, Ralph is a little more reserved. When he speaks, he's going to make sure that you're done saying whatever you want to say. And you seem to have that same sort of consideration thing going, where me, I'm clueless and I just keep talking and talking and talking. So I get nervous when there's a couple seconds of dead space. But anyway, so as long as you're prepared, that,
Hey, is that folk music that you play there? What is that? How do you call that folk music?
I think it was Studs Terkel who asked Big Bill Brunzi, did he consider his blues music to be folk music? And Big Bill says, well, never heard no horses.
Don't hesitate. It could be your ticket to a new tomorrow.
Eyes like a morning star, cheeks like a rose. Laura was a pretty girl, everybody knows. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. Ride through the lonely night, ride through the day, keep that herd moving on its way. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. Ride through the stormy night, dark is the sky. Wish I'd stayed in Abilene, where it's mighty warm and dry. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. Face like a prairie flower, laughing all the day. Laura was a pretty girl, now she's gone away. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. All along the Colorado Trail. All along the Colorado Trail. You're off.
Very nice, very nice. The show is Horses Sing None of It. My name is Ralph Litwin, and you'll notice that we're not in our usual studio with our usual backdrop. That is because they turned the air conditioning off there, and we didn't want to miss out on this special guest, so we're in a secret location somewhere beneath the Earth's surface, somewhere in New Jersey.
You just gave it away.
New Jersey is a big state.
Yeah, I suppose it's not a secret though anymore. How you doing?
Good. Our guest is 25 years experience in music journalism, singer-songwriter Scott Alarik.
Great to be here, Ralph. Thanks.
Good to have you.
Yeah.
And you've just published a novel that's based on the folk music scene.
Yeah. Yeah. So far as I know, it's the first novel that's completely set in the modern folk world. There have been books that have had, references of folk music and stuff, but as far as I know, even during the '60s, nobody did, and so I figured it's about time, and you have to be a folkie to do it. So it's a love story. It's called Revival, a folk music novel, and it's a love story set in the Cambridge folk scene. That's where I'm from, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's a love story about two very different folk musicians and songwriters who are drawn together by their shared passion for the music. Scenes take place at open mics and jam sessions and big concerts and big festivals and recording studios, and there's actually even a folk radio show interview in the book.
It's a great story.
Thanks.
Very moving at points.
Thank you. Yeah, I really wanted to get at, I wrote in journalism. I covered folk music for the Boston Globe for many years, and I found that there are some truths you need fiction to tell. When you think about it, it's kind of funny that why we would invent stories to tell each other that we know are not true. We say right on the cover, it's a novel, it's not true. And I think what happens is it allows us to get to some different kinds of truth, emotional truths particularly. And I really wanted to get at the wonder of the music and of the old songs. Let me give you an example. The older character hosts an open mic and a jam session. He's a guy who should have become a very big star, but now he's just hosting an open mic and folk jam, and thinks of himself as a failure, but nobody else around him does. And he meets a young, ambitious songwriter who's got a terrible case of nerves and shyness, named Kit Palmer, and they kind of mentor each other through the book. But this happens fairly early in the book. She's like so many of the young people coming up in the scene today. She grew up playing fiddle, and she's at the jam session in the back room, and he goes back to check her out, and he starts wondering about this song that we just sang. Kit sat with a half-dozen jammers at a small table by the far end of the room. They had finished a tune and were laughing and talking in the time-honored way of the jam. Applause is considered bad form because it suggests a performance atmosphere. So after a tune, there's a period of idle chatter, sipping beers, laughing and shuffling chairs, until somebody begins another tune. There is an unspoken order to all this, but nobody really knows what it is. It's simply the way it's always been since the first caveman noticed his neighbor beating on a rock, wandered over and said, "Hey, I got a stick too." A young guitarist in a faded Boston Celtics jersey, neatly trimmed beard stubble and Martin guitar baseball cap, suddenly began to sing a traditional cowboy song, Colorado Trail. Nathan walked closer, putting a finger over his lips when a few people started to say hi. He wanted to listen. Weep all ye falling rains, wail winds wail, all along, along, along the Colorado Trail. You could almost hear the slow padding of horses and cattle in the easy gait of the song. It vaguely tells a story about a pretty girl named Laura whom the cowboy loves and misses. But the song never explains who she is or what's happened to her. She's simply gone away. As a young man, that drove Nathan crazy. He tried to learn the song a few times, but without knowing what happened to Laura or even what her relationship was to the cowboy, he didn't know how to approach it. Now he thought those omissions were brilliant, because the song really isn't about Laura or even the lovelorn cowboy. It's simply about being alone in a lonely place and wishing that you weren't. Nathan certainly knew what that felt like. Bobbing his head lightly to the beat, Nathan closed his eyes and wondered what it was about sad songs that appeal to us so much. Do we like being sad? Even the up-tempo songs at the Jam were usually about train wrecks, dead mothers, ghastly murders, and ghostly lovers walking these hills in long black veils. Maybe it's like those actors who say they prefer playing villains because they're more interesting. Our dark feelings have more complex palettes, at least in art they do. But Nathan had learned that form usually follows function in traditional music. Perhaps our unhappy feelings are more in need of examining than our happy ones. Who needs to solve happiness? We need to understand the dark sides of life. That's where the dangers are. Why else would cowboys have sung all those sad love songs? It was the one time they could display their inner selves, explore their feelings, and share them with friends. And those deeper feelings need attention, even on a cattle drive. Leave them alone too long, unexamined and unexpressed, and they fester like an untreated wound. Maybe that's why Colorado Trail leads us away from the particulars about Laura and the cowboy. Laura becomes everybody's absent love, and the cowboy's loneliness becomes everybody's loneliness. And doesn't the simple act of sharing that in a song make us a little less lonely?
Beautiful.
Thanks. It's one of the things I really like about Nathan, the character, the older guy, is that he's been in the music so long, around folk music so long, and he never gets tired of wondering about it. And he loves to wonder about the things he can't figure out. But whatever he thinks he's doing, wherever he thinks he's going, whatever he thinks he's thinking about, he's always kind of pondering about the music and thinking about the music. He's very much in love with the mystery of folk music and how much bigger it is and how much wonder there is to it.
Nice.
Thanks. And another reason that I wanted to write the novel, Ralph, is I wanted to show what it's like to live in this world in the 21st century. I kind of think of Revival as a love story within a love story. There's this love story between Nathan Warren and Kit Palmer, these two folk musicians, but all around it is a love story to the folk world itself and to how it exists in the 21st century. And so I have scenes, like I was saying, at open mics and jam sessions and community coffee houses, as well as big concerts and things. But I also wanted to show the process of being a folk musician from the inside out, writing a song and making a record. And there's a lot of scenes where they're making a record together. And also showing the process of writing a song. I don't think of all the art forms I know of, I don't think there's one that's more dependent on the whims of inspiration than songwriting. You'll often hear people say, well, I wrote this song, it took me 5 years to write it, which means that for 4 3/4 years they were stumped. They didn't know where to go, they didn't know what to do next. And that sort of happens to Nathan through the whole process of the book. So let's see, let me sing this song. This is the song that I use as the one he writes. And then I'll do a little reading about how this song comes to him in the first place, how he begins it. Maybe we'll sing the song first. It's a song of mine. I picked it just because it was the latest song I'd written, and the more I realized it was a perfect song for Nathan. But it was weird to kind of dissect the song and then put it back together with his story in it instead of mine, with why would he have thought of this verse, and what about his experience would make him think this. And after writing this, my first novel, I can tell I have a lot more sympathy for why so many novelists are crazy people. Song called All That Is True. Make me well, someone, break the spell that's kept me down since first I fell. Guide me clear of my easy fears, cold company for all these years. And Every day is the same old song. Everything I do is wrong. When it was spring, everyone would sing, we can do anything. Now each new door seems I've walked through before. There's no frontiers anymore. Every day, oh, it's the same old song. Everything I do is wrong. What made us think it would all be so clean? Love, the magician, we sang. What made us think that our hearts would be enough, all that we ever would need? Nights are numb, still sleep won't come, wondering, what have I done? Things I said but never meant, things I meant but never said. Every day, oh, it's the same old song. Everything I do is wrong. What made us think it would all be so clean? Love, the magician, we sang. What made us think that our hearts would be enough, all that we ever would need? Day on day, live the same old way, never motion, never change. All that is true, and the only way through is to find my way back home to you. All that is true, and the only way through is to find my way back home to you.
Beautiful song.
Thanks.
It's nice to hear the melody
Thanks. Oh yeah, that.
after
yeah.
having read it in the book.
Yeah. Actually, what we have now is on our website. There's an iTunes playlist of all the songs in the book, and one of the guy that helped me with it, B.J. Mansueti, did a great job of finding the authentic folky singer-songwriter version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He actually found a version of Johnny Marks, the guy who wrote it, singing it, and it not only sounds like, you know, a songwriter singing his own song, but it's perfect for this song because he's not a great singer, and the song is not done by a great singer in the book. But anyway, now here I'll do this little snatch from the.
We should let folks
book.
know how they can find out more information about your book and your recordings.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my website is scottalarik.com. That's SCOTTALARIK. But if they have trouble remembering that, Revival Novel. Just remember revivalnovel.com. It'll get you to the same place. So, and then they can find that iTunes playlist. And some of these readings are there to download too, if people want to hear them for themselves. And here is how this song begins in the book. Nathan was sweeping the kitchen floor, humming quietly to the slow swish of the broom. He stopped suddenly, realizing he was remembering the melody to an old unfinished song. He hadn't thought of it in years, but always meant to finish it someday. Why had it come back to him now? He walked into the living room, picked up his guitar, and sang the first two lines. Make me well, someone break the spell that's kept me down since first I fell. He sang it again and laughed, remembering the self-pitying lament he'd tried to write after that opening couplet. Pompous young twit. He hadn't even liked the girl who inspired it. He just hadn't liked the idea of her dumping him. It had been nothing but vanity, pure, foolish vanity. No wonder he couldn't finish it. It wasn't true. Maybe that's why it came back to him after all these years. Maybe he'd grown up enough to know what to write after those first two lines. He felt a faint tickle of inspiration, the strange feeling that ideas were forming into words in that place beneath our conscious thoughts. He'd always liked the melody and thought it had something to say. There must be some reason it returned to him today. But it had been such a long time since he'd written anything. The old fear flashed through him. What makes you think you can relight the old dead fires of inspiration? Keep them cold. They're safer that way. They can't burn you. Always a reason to not do something. But then he thought about Kit during those nor'easters, alone and hurt, wondering what she'd done to drive him away and writing that beautiful new song, turning her feelings inward and then outward to the way we all feel when winter makes us seem so alone in the world. He tentatively touched the guitar as if it was something strange and new in his arms. His fingers faltered and fluttered from the strings. He was afraid. It had been so long, so long. But then he realized he was feeling something different, more recent, not the familiar specters of cold ash and dead ember, the memory of wood. It did not bring the familiar pain, but something that tingled excitedly, expectantly beneath the fear. What was it? He smiled and caught his breath. Oh, that. He realized that his fingers felt on the strings the way they had at the first touch of Kit's soft skin, the first time they made love. How his hands had fluttered and faltered on her shoulders and along her arms and back, and how she'd smiled at him, warmly, safely, and leaned into his hands until they found their firmness. He closed his eyes, keeping that smile inside him, and began to play. He pressed his fingers down until the old sureness returned.
Great.
Thanks. Thanks.
Now there's something that's not on our agenda, but I'm curious. It says in your bio that you were a Vietnam War draft resistor and
Yes.
spent 18 months in federal prison.
19. I count
19.
every one of them. Yeah, 19 months. Yeah, that's all they'd let me do of a 2-year sentence. It was called flatting out a 2-year sentence. Yeah. Yeah. 1971, 72.
Can you talk more about that experience?
Well, it was a big chunk. I mean, I turned 21 doing it. So, I mean, if you think back and, you know, when you're 20, 21, 22, 6 months is a lifetime. So it was a big chunk of my life. And then you count in 2 years of doing the trial and all of that. Basically, it took up from 18 to 22 of 18 to 22 of my life. But I'm glad I did it. I was resisting the draft as much as the war. I mean, I thought the two were linked, but I felt that especially in a time when there's no war, or when there's no declared war, the idea of a peacetime draft is just something that a free society can't do. I mean, if the government can just sweep you off the street whenever it says it needs to, and turn you into its employee, essentially, then we're not, you know, the government isn't the servant of the people. We're living by their leave. That was kind of the way I felt about it then, and still do. But it was a hard. Actually, I'm working on a book about it right now. So Revival kind of showed me how to maybe be able to tell the story.
Great. We'll
Yeah.
look forward to that.
Thanks.
What do you have for us next?
Well, as much as this was a novel, very much a novel, a love story, and a story about being a musician, I couldn't get through the whole novel without figuring out a way to wiggle in some of my favorite true stories about folk music. One of the things I love about folk music is that it's so much about real people and real things. So this is my all-time favorite true story about folk music. And I'll go from that right into, if I had to pick one all-time favorite American folk song, it would probably be the one I'll do right after this. And you can join me, I think, on some harmonica on that. Fame is a funny duck in the folk world. Folks' notion of fame has always been both larger and smaller than the kind of fame pop culture celebrates. Nathan wanted to explore that in one of the classes because it showed some essential demarcation points between folk and the mainstream music industry. He knew a couple of stories that fit the bill. In the 1970s, Pete Seeger was invited to sing in Barcelona, Spain. Francisco Franco's fascist government, the last of the dictatorships that started World War II, was still in power but declining. A pro-democracy movement was gaining strength, and to prove it, they invited America's best-known freedom singer to Spain. More than 100,000 people were in the stadium where rock bands had played all day, but the crowd had come for Seeger. As Pete prepared to go on, government officials handed him a list of songs he was not allowed to sing. Pete studied it mournfully, saying it looked an awful lot like his set list, but they insisted he must not sing any of these songs. Pete took the government's list of banned songs and strolled on stage. He held up the paper and said, "I've been told that I'm not allowed to sing these songs." He grinned at the crowd and said, "So I'll just play the chords. Maybe you know the words. They didn't say anything about you singing them." He strummed his banjo to one song after another, and they all sang. 100,000 defiant freedom singers breaking the law with Pete Seeger, filling the stadium with words their government did not want them to hear, words they all knew and had sung together in secret circles for years. What could the government do? Arrest 100,000 singers? It had been beaten by a few banjo chords and the fame of a man whose songs were on the lips of the whole world. Folk is thought of as a fringe music, but what rock star has that kind of fame? Which of the world's great pop stars could have done what Pete Seeger did, knowing that 100,000 people from another country, speaking another language, would know the words to the songs he came to sing for them, and that they would rise and do it in defiance of their government? That is fame.
And that is a wonderful story.
Thanks. As I walked out in the streets of Laredo, I walked out in Laredo one day. I spied a young cowboy all draped in white linen, draped in white linen, cold as the clay. I see by your outfit that you are a cowboy. These words he did say as I boldly stepped by. Come sit down beside me and hear my sad story. I'm a young cowboy and I know I must die. 'Twas once in the saddle